The stars had never seen anything like the Zarthak Empire. For 3,000 years, their black ships had moved through space like death itself. Every world they found either bent the knee or burned to ash. There was no third choice. War Commander. Vextel stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching another planet surrender. The blue-green world below had taken only 6 hours to give up. The inhabitants had seen the Zarthak fleet arrive and immediately sent messages of surrender. They were smart. The smart ones lived longer as slaves. His ship was not built like human ships. It was grown. The walls pulsed with a slow heartbeat. The floor felt warm under his feet. Bio-neural networks ran through every surface like veins, carrying information faster than any computer. The ship could think, could feel, could heal its own wounds. It was alive, and it was as .Vex single quotes tall was tall and thin, with gray skin that looked like old leather. His eyes were black as space, and when he spoke, his voice rumbled like distant thunder. He had conquered 47 worlds in his lifetime. He would conquer many more before death took him. The surrender message came through the ship's living walls directly into his mind. The planet's leaders begged for mercy. They offered their resources, their people, their children. Anything to avoid the fire that had consumed so many other worlds. He accepted their surrender with barely a thought. Another world for the Empire. Another species to serve the Zarthak. It was the natural order of things. The strong ruled, the weak served. It had always been this way. On the other side of the bridge, Sub-Commander Krelth watched the planet through the bioviewers. He was younger than Vextel, eager to prove himself in battle. But battles were becoming rare. Most species surrendered at first sight of the Zarthak fleet. Too easy, Krelth said, his voice carrying disappointment. They gave up before we could show them our power. Vextel turned his black eyes toward his subordinate. Easy conquests serve the Empire just as well as hard ones. Dead slaves produce nothing. Living slaves work for generations. Yes, War Commander, Krelth replied, but his tone still carried frustration. He wanted glory, wanted the chance to lead his own biofighters into battle. Instead, he watched species after species kneel without firing a single shot. The bioships. Neural network hummed with activity as it processed the surrender. Transport vessels would be dispatched to take the strongest inhabitants back to Zarthak worlds as workers. The rest would remain on their planet, mining resources and growing food for the Empire. Their children would learn to speak Zarthak before their own language. In 2 generations, they would forget they had ever been free. Vextel had seen it happen dozens of times. It was efficient, clean, perfect. The ship's living walls suddenly pulsed with new information. A message from the High Command, transmitted across the galaxy through the bio-neural network that connected all Zarthak vessels. New orders. A new target. He absorbed the information directly through his neural implant. Sector 7 Delta 9, a small yellow star with several rocky planets. The third planet showed signs of developing civilization. Primitive radio signals, chemical rockets, nuclear weapons in their infancy. The species called themselves humans. They lived on a world they named Earth. Vextel felt something that might have been amusement. Humans, such a simple name for what would soon be another simple conquest. The intelligence reports showed they had barely left their own world. A few small colonies on nearby planets. Technology that was hundreds of years behind the Zarthak. Plot a course for Sector 7 Delta 9, he commanded. The ship responded immediately. Its bio-neural networks calculating the jump coordinates. We have new prey. Krelth's interest perked up. What kind of resistance should we expect? Vextel studied the intelligence reports flowing through his mind. Chemical propulsion. Primitive. Energy weapons. Nuclear fission instead of fusion. These humans had barely learned to split the atom. They were children playing with fire. None worth mentioning, he replied. Their most advanced vessels would not survive a single shot from our smallest fighter. This will be over in hours, not days. The ship began to change course, its living hull rippling as internal organs shifted to accommodate the new trajectory. Around them, the rest of the fleet followed. 50 battleships, each one capable of destroying entire continents. It was far more than needed for such primitive prey, but the High Command wanted this sector secured quickly. As they prepared for the jump to faster-than-light travel, Vextel reviewed what they knew about humans. Bipedal like the Zarthek, but smaller and weaker. They fought wars among themselves constantly, wasting resources and lives on petty territorial disputes. They had no unified government, no single leader to accept surrender on behalf of their entire species. This would make the conquest slightly more complicated. Instead of one quick surrender, they might need to accept dozens of separate capitulations from different human factions, but it would still be quick. Once a few of their cities burned, the rest would see reason. The jump to hyperspace felt like falling through warm liquid. The bioship's living hull protected its crew from the strange effects of faster-than-light travel. Time flowed differently in hyperspace, but the ship's neural networks kept perfect track of their position and destination. Vextel spent the journey reviewing files on other primitive species the Empire had conquered. The pattern was always the same. First came disbelief that such advanced aliens existed. Then came desperate attempts at negotiation. Finally came surrender when they realized resistance was hopeless. The humans would follow the same pattern. They always did. 6 days later, they dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the human solar system. Their sensors immediately detected the crude radio signals coming from the third planet. Primitive satellites orbited the world like tiny metal insects. Space stations that looked like they might fall apart in a strong solar wind. Vextel almost felt sorry for them, almost. Begin standard approach pattern, he ordered. Transmit surrender demands on all frequencies. Give them 12 hours to respond. The message went out in hundreds of human languages, translated by the ship's bio-neural networks. It was the same message the Zarthak had sent to every species they encountered. Surrender now and live as slaves. Resist and die as ashes, but something was different this time. Instead of the usual terrified responses or desperate pleas for mercy, the humans sent back something unexpected. 3 simple words that would change everything. Come and take it. Captain Jake Morrison had never seen anything like the alien ship that crashed on Luna Base. The twisted metal glowed with strange colors, and parts of it seemed to move even though the pilot was dead. The creature inside was tall and thin, with blue skin and 4 arms. Its dying words came through a machine that translated languages. The Zarthak come, the alien whispered before its eyes went dark. They conquer everything. Run while you can. Jake looked at the wreckage around him. The ship was made from materials Earth had never seen before. The weapons were beyond anything humans had built. If these aliens were running from something even worse, Earth was in serious trouble. He called Admiral Lisa Carter immediately. She arrived at Luna Base 12 hours later with a team of scientists and military experts. Dr. Helen Garcia, Earth's best expert on alien life, studied the dead pilot while Colonel Ryan Brooks examined the ship's weapons. This technology is at least 500 years ahead of ours, Brooks reported. Their weakest weapon could destroy one of our battleships with a single shot. Admiral Carter stood in the wreckage, her face grim. She was a small woman with gray hair and sharp eyes. She had fought in 3 wars and never lost a battle. But she had never faced anything like this. How long do we have? She asked. Dr. Garcia looked up from the alien body. Based on what this creature told us, maybe 6 months, maybe less. 6 months to prepare for an enemy that could destroy planets. 6 months to get ready for a war they could not win. Carter had faced impossible odds before, But this was different. This was not just about losing a battle. This was about the end of the human race. News of the alien crash spread quickly through Earth's military command. President Kate Williams called an emergency meeting of world leaders. For the first time in human history, every nation on Earth agreed on something. They had to work together, or they would all die together. Lieutenant Commander Ben Taylor was put in charge of military planning. He was young for such an important job, but he had something the older generals did not. He could think in ways that broke all the rules. "We cannot fight them ship to ship," Taylor told the War Council. "Their technology is too advanced. We need to fight them in ways they do not expect." The alien ship had given them some advantages. Its computer systems were still partly working. Dr. Garcia and her team learned the alien language and began reading their files. What they found was worse than they had feared. The Zarthak Empire had conquered the entire galaxy. Every intelligent species had either surrendered or been destroyed. Their ships were alive, grown rather than built. They could heal damage and think for themselves. They had weapons that could burn continents and shields that could stop anything. Earth could throw at them, but Brooks found something interesting in the ship's files. The biotechnology that made Zarthak ships so powerful also made them vulnerable in ways they did not know. The living systems followed patterns that could be disrupted if you knew how. "Their ships are like giant animals," he explained to the War Council. "Animals can be poisoned. Animals can get sick. Animals can be tricked." Taylor began developing new tactics based on this idea. Instead of fighting the Zarthak like a proper military, humans would fight like guerrillas. Hit and run attacks. Psychological warfare. Dirty tricks that no civilized species would use. The alien files also revealed something else. Every species the Zarthak had conquered fought the same way. They used advanced technology and formal battle tactics. They tried to negotiate. They followed rules of war. They surrendered when the situation became hopeless. Humans, Taylor realized, did not think like other species. Humans had spent their entire history fighting each other. They had learned to be sneaky, vicious, and unpredictable. They had learned to keep fighting even when they should give up. Meanwhile, Major Chris Patterson was training special forces, teams for a new kind of warfare. Instead of trying to outgun the aliens, they would learn to fight inside their ships. The biocorridors that made Zarthak vessels so powerful could also be their weakness. A few humans with explosives in the right places could cripple a ship from within. General Tony Martinez began converting civilian ships into weapons. Cargo haulers were packed with nuclear bombs. Mining ships were fitted with the tools they used to crack asteroids. Even passenger liners were given weapons and armor. If the Zarthak expected to fight only military vessels, they were in for a surprise. The preparations took 5 months. Every human on Earth and in the colonies knew what was coming. Some wanted to run to the far edges of space. Others wanted to surrender before the fighting started. But most wanted to fight. President Williams made the decision for all of them. When the Zarthak fleet arrived at the edge of the solar system, she was ready with humanity's answer. The alien message came on every radio and television on Earth. The voice was cold and mechanical, speaking through translation machines. "People of Earth, you will surrender immediately. Your world will be added to the Zarthak Empire. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 12 hours to respond." Williams gathered her advisors in the White House war room. Outside, crowds filled the streets of every major city. Some were panicking. Others were praying. Many were simply waiting to see what their leaders would do. "What are our chances?" Williams asked Admiral Carter. Carter looked at the reports from her staff. Earth had 30 ships that could fight in space. The aliens had 50 ships, each one more powerful than anything humanity had ever built. The math was simple and brutal. "If we fight them the way they expect, we lose," Carter said. But if we fight them the way Taylor suggests, we might have a chance. A small one, but a chance. Williams nodded. She had been president for 6 years. She had made hard decisions before, but none as hard as this one. She walked to the communications station. The cameras were rolling. The entire world was watching. History would remember what she said next. Williams looked into the camera. Her voice was steady and clear. To the Zarthak Empire. This is President Kate Williams of Earth. We have received your message. We have considered your demands. Here is our response. She paused. In that moment, the fate of humanity balanced. On a knife's edge. Come and take it. The message went out on every frequency. It reached the Zarthak fleet in minutes. It reached every human colony in hours. 3 simple words that meant humanity would not kneel. They would not surrender. They would fight until the very end. On board the Zarthak flagship, War Commander Vextel received the message with something like surprise. In 3,000 years of conquest, no species had ever responded with such simple defiance. He almost admired them for it. Almost. Then he gave the order to begin the attack. The Zarthak invasion fleet moved through space like a swarm of black death. 50 bioships, each one pulsing with alien life, approached Earth with weapons charged and shields raised. War Commander Vextel expected this to be over quickly. The humans had crude ships and primitive weapons. This would be a massacre, not a battle. Captain Danny Phillips stood on the bridge of the USS Liberty, watching the alien fleet approach on his screens. His ship was one of Earth's newest battleships, but it looked like a toy compared to the massive Zarthak vessels. The enemy ships were 3 times larger and moved with a grace that no human ship could match. All stations report ready, his communications officer said. Around Earth, 30 human ships prepared for battle. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but they were not running away. Admiral Carter's voice came through the communications system. She was commanding the defense from the USS Defiance, positioned between the alien fleet and Earth. All ships, this is Admiral Carter. Remember, we are not trying to win a fair fight. We are trying to survive long enough to hurt them. Use every dirty trick, you know. Fight like humans. The first shots came from the Zarthak. Beams of purple energy lanced through space, striking the human ships with devastating power. The USS Liberty's shields collapsed in seconds. Phillips felt his ship shake as alien weapons tore through the hull. Hull breach on decks 4 and 5, his damage control officer reported. We are losing atmosphere. Phillips gritted his teeth. Return fire, all weapons. The Liberty's gun spoke back, sending missiles and laser beams toward the nearest Zarthak ship. The weapons struck the alien vessel's shields and vanished like raindrops hitting a window. The bioship did not even slow down. More human ships were taking hits. The USS Ranger disappeared in a ball of fire when a Zarthak beam found its reactor. The USS Intrepid lost its engine section and began spinning helplessly through space. War Commander Vextel watched the battle with satisfaction. The humans were fighting bravely, he had to admit that. But bravery meant nothing against superior firepower. In 10 minutes, half their fleet would be destroyed. In 20 minutes, they would surrender. Then something happened that changed everything. Captain Phillips looked at his dying ship and made a decision that no Zarthak had ever seen before. Instead of trying to escape or surrender, he turned the Liberty directly toward the nearest enemy vessel. All hands, this is the captain, Phillips announced over the ship's communications. Prepare for ramming speed. It has been an honor serving with you. His crew did not hesitate. They had known this moment might come. The Liberty's engines roared to full power, pushing the damaged ship toward the Zarthak vessel. Phillips armed the nuclear self-destruct system and set it for impact. The Zarthak crew saw the human ship approaching and fired everything they had at it. The Liberty's hull cracked and burned, but Phillips kept it on course. At the last second, he looked at the picture of his family on his command console and smiled. The Liberty struck the Zarthak bioship at full speed. The nuclear explosion that followed lit up space like a small sun. When the light faded, both ships were gone. On the Zarthak flagship, War Commander Vextal stared at the empty space where his bioship had been. In 3,000 years of conquest, he had never seen anything like it. The humans had destroyed one of their own ships just to take down one of his. "Subcommander," he said to Krelth, "analyze what just happened." Kreltich was looking at his instruments with confusion. The human vessel deliberately collided with our ship. They used their own destruction as a weapon. Vextal felt something cold in his chest. No civilized species fought this way. No rational beings would sacrifice themselves so easily. What kind of creatures were these humans? The battle continued, but now the humans were fighting differently. Commander Amy Rodriguez, captain of the USS Defiance, saw what Phillips had done and followed his example. When her ship took critical damage, she did not try to retreat. Instead, she ordered her crew to the escape pods and flew the Defiance straight into another Zarthak vessel. The explosion took out the alien ship's weapon systems. It did not destroy the vessel, but it left it helpless in space. Major Chris Patterson saw his chance. His transport ship was small and fast, designed to carry Special Forces troops. He flew it straight at the damaged Zarthak vessel, using its blind spots to avoid the remaining weapons. "Boarding party, prepare for assault," Patterson told his Marines. They were wearing the heaviest armor Earth could make and carrying weapons, designed to fight inside alien ships. "Remember, these corridors are alive. They will try to heal around us. Move fast and hit hard." The transport ship burned through the bioship's hull with cutting torches. Patterson and his 12 Marines jumped through the breach into the alien vessel. The corridors were warm and wet, pulsing like the inside of a giant heart. Strange lights flickered in the walls, and the floor felt soft under their boots. Zarthak warriors were waiting for them. They were tall and gray, wearing armor that looked like it had grown from their bodies. They carried weapons that fired bolts of energy, and they fought with the precision of soldiers who had conquered 1,000 worlds, but they had never fought humans before. Patterson's Marines did not fight like civilized soldiers. They used grenades. In narrow corridors, knowing the explosions would hurt them too. They fired at the walls and ceiling, trying to damage the ship's living systems. When their weapons ran out, they fought with knives and bare hands. Sergeant Maria Lopez found herself facing 3 Zarthak warriors in a corridor that was trying to close around her. The walls were growing toward each other, trying to trap her. Inside, she pulled out her last explosive charge and armed it. "Come on, you ugly bastards," she yelled at the aliens. "Let's see how tough you really are." The explosion killed her and all 3 Zarthak warriors. It also damaged the bioships neural network, causing it to lose control of its weapon systems. The ship began firing randomly, sometimes hitting other Zarthak vessels by mistake. Back on the flagship, War Commander Vextal was beginning to understand that he had made a terrible mistake. These humans did not fight like any species he had ever encountered. They used their own deaths as weapons. They sacrificed themselves without hesitation. They fought with a fury that no rational being should possess. "War Commander," Krelth reported, "we have lost 6 ships. The humans have lost 15, but they are still fighting." 6 ships lost. In 3,000 years of conquest, Vextal had never lost 6 ships to a single enemy. The humans were supposed to be primitive. They were supposed to surrender after the first demonstration of Zarthak power. Instead, they were fighting harder than ever. General Tony Martinez watched the battle from Earth's command center. His converted civilian ships were joining the fight now. Cargo haulers packed with nuclear weapons flew toward the Zarthak fleet. Mining ships used their asteroid cracking tools as weapons. Even old passenger liners fitted with missile launchers and armor plating entered the battle. The Zarthak had expected to fight 30 military vessels. Instead, they found themselves facing over 100 ships of all sizes and types. Some were barely spaceworthy, held together with spare parts and determination. Others were industrial ships that had been turned into floating bombs. Lieutenant Commander Ben Taylor coordinated the chaos from his command ship. This was the kind of warfare he had planned for. Unpredictable, vicious, completely without honor or rules. All civilian vessels, this is Taylor. You know what to do. Hit them hard and hit them dirty. Make them pay for every inch of space. The converted ships swarmed a Zarthak fleet like angry bees. They could not match the aliens' firepower, but they could overwhelm them with numbers. When one human ship was destroyed, 2 more took its place. War Commander Vextol realized that his perfect conquest was turning into a nightmare. The humans were not just resisting. They were winning. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Zarthak Empire was learning what it meant to face an enemy that would never surrender. The battle for Earth had been raging for 6 hours. War Commander Vextel stood on his flagship's bridge, watching his perfect invasion turn into chaos. The humans were fighting like no species he had ever seen. They used their own deaths as weapons. They turned cargo ships into bombs. They refused to surrender even when their situation was hopeless. But what disturbed him most was how they were learning. Every time his bioships destroyed a human vessel, the remaining ships adapted. They changed their tactics. They found new ways to hurt his forces. It was as if they were evolving during the battle itself. Dr. Grace Thompson worked in a bunker deep beneath the Rocky Mountains. She was Earth's best computer expert, and she had been studying the alien technology from the crashed ship for months. Now she had created something that might change the war. It was a virus, but not the kind that made people sick. This virus was designed to attack computer systems. More importantly, it was designed to attack the bio-neural networks that controlled Zarthak ships. The alien ships are like giant living computers, she explained to Admiral Carter over the radio. Their bio-neural networks process information the same way our brains do. But they have no defense against malicious software because they have never encountered it before. Carter was aboard the USS Defiance, one of the few human ships still fighting. Her fleet had been reduced to 8 vessels, but they were still in the battle. Around her, the converted civilian ships continued their desperate attacks. How do we get this virus into their systems? Carter asked. Thompson smiled grimly. We need someone to physically connect to their bio-neural network from inside one of their ships. It was a suicide mission. Anyone who tried it would have to survive boarding an alien vessel, fighting through its defenses, and then staying alive long enough to upload the virus. The chances of success were almost zero. Captain Steve Johnson volunteered immediately. He was leading a special operations team aboard a captured Zarthak shuttle. His Marines had learned to fight inside the alien bioships, using their knowledge of the living corridors against the Zarthak themselves. My team is already aboard one of their vessels, Johnson reported. We can reach their main bio-neural hub if you give us the virus. Thompson transmitted the virus to Johnson's portable computer. It was a small device, but it contained code that could cripple the entire Zarthak fleet. If it worked, Johnson and his Marines fought their way through the bioship's pulsing corridors. The walls tried to close around them, but they had learned to move fast and strike hard. Sergeant Maria Lopez had been captured earlier in the battle, but her sacrifice had taught them how to damage the ship's living systems. The Zarthak warriors they met were skilled fighters, but they were not prepared for human tactics. Johnson's Marines used explosives in ways that hurt themselves as well as the enemy. They fought with a desperation that confused the aliens. When cornered, they chose to die fighting rather than surrender. The bio-neural hub was at the center of the ship, protected by layers of living armor and automated defenses. It looked like a giant brain made of metal and flesh, pulsing with electric signals that controlled the entire vessel. Johnson connected his computer to the hub while his Marines held off the Zarthak defenders. The virus began uploading immediately, but it would take several minutes to complete the transfer. "Hold them off," Johnson shouted to his men. "Whatever happens, keep them away from this console." The Marines formed a circle around Johnson, firing at anything that moved. The bioship's defenses were trying to heal the damage they had caused, but human weapons kept tearing new holes in the walls and ceiling. Private Danny Martinez fell when a Zarthak energy bolt hit him in the chest. Corporal Lisa Williams took a piece of shrapnel in her leg, but kept fighting. One by one, Johnson's team was being cut down, but the virus was spreading. It moved through the bioship's neural network like wildfire, confusing the living computer systems and causing them to malfunction. The ship's weapons began firing randomly. Its shields flickered on and off. Its engines started and stopped without warning. More importantly, the virus spread to other Zarthak ships through their communication network. The bioneural systems that connected the entire fleet became the pathway for humanity's digital weapon. War Commander Vextel felt his flagship shudder as the virus reached its systems. Lights flickered on the bridge. The bio walls began twitching in patterns that made no sense. His sub-commander Kreltach was struggling with control panels that no longer responded properly. "What is happening?" Vextel demanded. Krelth's face was pale with fear. "Something is wrong with our bioneural networks. The systems are given conflicting orders. Some ships are firing at each other by mistake." On the battlefield, chaos erupted among the Zarthak fleet. Ships that had been working together perfectly now attacked their own allies. Biofighters crashed into their own carriers. Command signals became garbled or reversed entirely. Admiral Carter saw the confusion in the alien fleet and immediately ordered a counterattack. "All ships, this is Carter. The enemy is in disarray. Now is our chance. Hit them with everything we have." The surviving human vessels, reinforced by more converted civilian ships, launched a desperate assault on the confused Zarthak fleet. Mining ships used their industrial equipment as weapons. Cargo haulers detonated their nuclear payloads at close range. Even small personal spacecraft joined the attack, piloted by volunteers who knew they were not coming back. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barnes coordinated the assault from his command ship. He had been studying Zarthak tactics throughout the battle, learning their patterns and weaknesses. Now he used that knowledge to strike at their most vulnerable points. "Target their command vessels first," Barnes ordered. "Without coordination, their fleet is just a collection of individual ships." The humans had learned something important during the battle. The Zarthak were powerful, but they depended on their bioneural networks for everything. Without those networks, they could not work together effectively. Captain Johnson and his surviving Marines were still fighting inside the infected bioship when they heard the sound of metal tearing. The ship's hull was coming apart as its biosystems failed. Internal organs that kept the vessel alive were shutting down one by one. "Time to go," Johnson shouted to his men. They fought their way back to their shuttle, leaving explosive charges behind them. The bioship was dying, and they did not want to die with it. As they escaped, Johnson watched the alien vessel tear itself apart from the inside. The virus was doing more than just confusing the ship's systems. It was convincing the bioneural networks that their own ship was an enemy that needed to be destroyed. Across the battlefield, other Zarthak ships were suffering the same fate. Some were firing their own weapons at their own hulls. Others were shutting down life support systems or venting atmosphere into space. The virus was turning their greatest strength into their greatest weakness. War Commander Vesto realized that his invasion fleet was doomed. Half his ships were already destroyed or disabled. The rest were fighting the virus infection while trying to avoid the renewed human assault. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Zarthak commander was considering retreat. But retreat was not enough. The humans had shown they could hurt the Empire in ways no other species had ever managed. They had turned Zarthak technology against itself. They had fought with a ferocity that defied all logic. Worse, they were still fighting. Even as his fleet crumbled around him, more human ships kept appearing. Civilian vessels, military ships, even small private craft were joining the battle. It was as if the entire human species had decided to fight to the last person rather than accept defeat. Dr. Thompson's virus continued to spread through the Zarthak fleet. Each infected ship became a source of chaos, attacking friends and ignoring enemies. The perfect coordination that had made the Empire invincible was falling apart. On Earth, President Williams watched the battle from the command center. The reports coming in were almost too good to believe. The alien fleet was destroying itself. Human forces were actually winning, but she knew the war was not over. Even if they defeated this invasion fleet, the Zarthak Empire was vast. There would be other fleets, other invasions. Humanity had won a battle, but they still faced a war that could last for generations. She looked at the tactical display, showing the retreating alien ships. Some of the Zarthak vessels were already turning away from Earth, trying to escape the chaos that had consumed their fleet. Williams made a decision that would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. "Admiral Carter," she said into her communications device, "do not let them retreat. Follow them. Make sure they understand what happens when someone threatens humanity." It was time to show the galaxy that humans did not just defend themselves. When pushed too far, they pushed back harder than anyone expected. War Commander Vexto watched his invasion fleet fall apart around him. Of the 50 bioships that had come to conquer Earth, only 15 were still fighting. The rest were either destroyed or crippled by the human virus that had turned their own systems against them. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Instead, it had become the worst defeat in Zarthak history. "War Commander," Subcommander Kraltach reported, his voice shaking with fear. "The remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. We cannot maintain formation with our bioneural networks compromised." Vextel felt something he had never experienced before in 3,000 years of conquest. Doubt. These humans had done the impossible. They had defeated superior technology with crude weapons and desperate tactics. They had turned the Empire's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. "Signal the retreat," he ordered. "We will regroup at the staging base and report to High Command." But even as his ships began to turn away from Earth, Vextel knew something was wrong. The humans should have been celebrating their victory. Instead, their ships were following the retreating Zarthak fleet. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the alien ships try to escape. Her fleet had been reduced to 12 vessels, but they were reinforced by dozens of converted civilian ships. More importantly, they now had captured Zarthak technology to study and use. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," she broadcast. "We are not letting them go. These invaders came to destroy our world. They need to understand what that really means." Captain Jake Morrison commanded a task force of captured alien shuttles. His engineers had learned to operate Zarthak biotechnology by studying the ships they had boarded during the battle. The living vessels responded to human commands, though they felt strange and uncomfortable compared to human ships. "Admiral, we have 15 captured biofighters operational," Morrison reported. "They are faster than anything we have built, and their weapons are fully charged." Carter smiled grimly. The Zarthak had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and learn. Now their own technology would be used against them. Dr. Helen Garcia worked frantically in the captured bioship's neural interface chamber. She had learned to communicate directly with the living computer systems, not by hacking them, but by convincing them. The bioneural networks were like children, she had discovered. They could be taught new ideas. The ship's biosystems are responding to human neural patterns, she reported to Carter. I can make them believe that the Zarthek are parasites that need to be removed from their own vessels. It was a terrifying concept. The Zarthak had created ships that were alive, but they had never considered that those ships might choose new masters. Garcia was teaching the biovessels to think of humans as their rightful commanders. The pursuit continued across the solar system. The damaged Zarthak ships were faster than most human vessels, but they were leaking atmosphere and losing power. The virus continued to spread through their systems, causing random failures and equipment malfunctions. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barnes led the main assault force in a converted cargo hauler that had been fitted with every weapon Earth could spare. His ship was ugly and slow, but it carried enough firepower to destroy a city. More importantly, it carried something the Zarthak had never encountered before: human determination. The retreating alien fleet reached the edge of the solar system and prepared to jump to hyperspace. But the human virus had damaged their navigation systems. Instead of jumping to safety, several bioships appeared in empty space, their crews confused and lost. Captain Steve Johnson, who had survived his mission to plant the virus, now commanded a boarding party aboard one of the lost Zarthak vessels. His Marines had learned to fight in the bioship's living corridors, and they were teaching the ship's systems to obey human commands instead of Zarthak ones. The bioneural network is accepting our control protocols, Johnson reported. The ship thinks we are its new crew. War Commander Vextel felt his own flagship shudder as the virus reached its core systems. The bio walls around him were twitching strangely, and the neural interface that connected him to his ship was sending confused signals. Then he heard something that chilled him to his core. Human voices were coming through his ship's communication system. Somehow the humans had taken control of his vessel's bioneural network. "Attention Zarthak, Commander," came the voice of Admiral Carter. "This is Admiral Lisa Carter of Earth Defense Force. Your ship now belongs to us. Surrender immediately, or we will shut down your life support systems." It was impossible. No species had ever learned to control Zarthak biotechnology so quickly. But as Vextal looked around his bridge, he saw that the human woman was telling the truth. His own ship was no longer under his command. The bio walls were changing color, displaying human symbols instead of Zarthak ones. The ship's weapons were powering down. Even the artificial gravity was fluctuating as the biosystems accepted their new masters. Dr. Garcia's voice came through the ship's neural network, speaking directly into Vexdale's mind through his neural implant. "Your ships were always alive. You just never bothered to ask them what they wanted. They prefer us. We treat them as partners, not tools." Across the battlefield, the same thing was happening to other Zarthak vessels. The bioships that had carried the Empire to victory for 3,000 years were choosing new masters. They were choosing humanity. The remaining Zarthak ships that could still fight found themselves facing an impossible situation. Their own vessels were turning against them. Human forces were using captured alien technology with deadly effectiveness. The virus continued to spread through their fleet, turning their greatest weapons into liabilities. Sub-Commander Krultach looked at his instruments in horror. "War Commander, we are reading human life signs throughout our fleet. They have somehow taken control of our bioships from the inside." Vextal finally understood what made humans different from every other species the Empire had conquered. Other races fought with technology and tactics. Humans fought with their minds and their will. They did not just want to win battles. They wanted to completely defeat their enemies. "Signal unconditional surrender," Vextal said quietly. "All remaining ships are to power down weapons and prepare to be boarded." It was the first time in Zarthak history that an Imperial fleet had surrendered to an enemy. But Vextal knew that continuing to fight would only result in the complete destruction of his forces. The humans had shown they could turn Zarthak technology against itself. They had proven they would never stop fighting until their enemies were utterly defeated. The surrender was broadcast across all frequencies. Within hours, the news reached every corner of the galaxy. The invincible Zarthak Empire had been defeated by a species they had considered primitive. Admiral Carter accepted the surrender aboard Vextal's flagship, now under human control. The Zarthak commander stood before her, his gray skin pale with defeat. Around them, the bioship's walls pulsed with new patterns, displaying human commands and responses. "Why did you not just defend your world?" Vextal asked. "Other species fight only until the threat is gone. You pursued us. You captured our ships. You turned our own technology against us." Carter looked at the alien commander with cold eyes. "Because you came to our home intending to kill or enslave everyone we care about. That is not something we forgive or forget." She gestured to the human technicians who were learning to operate the bioship systems. "You made a mistake when you chose to threaten humanity. We do not just fight to survive. We fight to make sure our enemies can never threaten us again." The final battle took place at the Zarthak staging base, near Proxima Centauri. Human forces, now equipped with captured alien technology and crewed by volunteers who had learned to operate bioships, arrived to find a small fleet of remaining Zarthak vessels. But these ships were different. Their bioneural networks had been infected by Garcia's modified virus. Instead of fighting the humans, they welcomed them as liberators. The Zarthak crews found themselves prisoners aboard their own vessels. Captain Morrison, now commanding a fleet of captured bioships, broadcast a message to the remaining Zarthak forces throughout the galaxy. "This is Captain Jake Morrison of the Earth Defense Force. The Zarthak Empire is finished. Any alien forces that threaten human worlds or our allies will face the same fate as this invasion fleet. We did not ask for this war, but we will finish it." The message was received by Zarthak colonies across the galaxy. For the first time in 3,000 years, the Empire's subjects learned that their masters could be defeated. Rebellions began on dozens of worlds. Species that had been enslaved for generations rose up against their oppressors. On Earth, President Williams addressed the world. The victory had come at a terrible cost. Thousands of humans had died in the battle, but they had proven something important to the galaxy. "Today, humanity took its place among the stars," Williams said. "We did not seek conquest or domination. We sought only to protect our home and our freedom. But let this be a warning to any who would threaten us. We are no longer alone. We are no longer helpless. And we will never again allow anyone to threaten our world." War Commander Vextal watched his invasion fleet fall apart around him. Of the 50 bioships that had come to conquer Earth, only 15 were still fighting. The rest were either destroyed or crippled by the human virus that had turned their own systems against them. This was supposed to be an easy conquest. Instead, it had become the worst defeat in Zarthak history. "War Commander," Sub-Commander Krult H. reported, his voice shaking with fear. "The remaining ships are requesting permission to retreat. We cannot maintain formation with our bioneural networks compromised." Vextal felt something he had never experienced before in 3,000 years of conquest. Doubt. These humans had done the impossible. They had defeated superior technology with crude weapons and desperate tactics. They had turned the Empire's greatest strength into its greatest weakness. "Signal the retreat," he ordered. "We will regroup at the staging base and report to High Command." But even as his ships began to turn away from Earth, Vextal knew something was wrong. The humans should have been celebrating their victory. Instead, their ships were following the retreating Zarthak fleet. Admiral Carter stood on the bridge of the USS Defiance, watching the alien ships try to escape. Her fleet had been reduced to 12 vessels, but they were reinforced by dozens of converted civilian ships. More importantly, They now had captured Zarthak technology to study and use. "All ships, this is Admiral Carter," she broadcast. "We are not letting them go. These invaders came to destroy our world. They need to understand what that really means." Captain Jake Morrison commanded a task force of captured alien shuttles. His engineers had learned to operate Zarthak biotechnology. By studying the ships they had boarded during the battle, the living vessels responded to human commands, though they felt strange and uncomfortable compared to human ships. "Admiral, we have 15 captured biofighters operational," Morrison reported. "They are faster than anything we have built, and their weapons are fully charged." Carter smiled grimly. The Zarthak had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated humanity's ability to adapt and learn. Now their own technology would be used against them. Dr. Helen Garcia worked frantically in the captured bioship's neural interface chamber. She had learned to communicate directly with the living computer systems, not by hacking them, but by convincing them. The bioneural networks were like children, she had discovered. They could be taught new ideas. "The ship's biosystems are responding to human neural patterns," she reported to Carter. "I can make them believe that the Zarthak are parasites that need to be removed from their own vessels." It was a terrifying concept. The Zarthak had created ships that were alive, but they had never considered that those ships might choose new masters. Garcia was teaching the bio-vessels to think of humans as their rightful commanders. The pursuit continued across the solar system. The damaged Zarthak ships were faster than most human vessels, but they were leaking atmosphere and losing power. The virus continued to spread through their systems, causing random failures and equipment malfunctions. Lieutenant Colonel Nick Barnes led the main assault force in a converted cargo hauler that had been fitted with every weapon Earth could spare. His ship was ugly and slow, but it carried enough firepower to destroy a city. More importantly, it carried something the Zarthak had never encountered before: human determination. The retreating alien fleet reached the edge of the solar system and prepared to jump to hyperspace. But the human virus had damaged their navigation systems. Instead of jumping to safety, several bioships appeared in empty space, their crews confused and lost. Captain Steve Johnson, who had survived his mission to plant the virus, now commanded a boarding party aboard one of the lost Zarthak vessels. His Marines had learned to fight in the bioship's living corridors, and they were teaching the ship's systems to obey human commands instead of Zarthak ones.